Hi, and welcome to this episode of Coaching Session. I'm delighted to be joined by none other than Steven Reid. Steven, welcome.
Thanks, Caulker.
So for those of you who don't know Steven off the top of your head, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into the amazing career that you had. You started off at Millwall, you then went on to Blackburn. You featured, I think, 343 games, career games, plus 23 or 27 international games. Have I got that right?
I was going to say 23, but 27 sounds a bit better, so I'll take that. It's 23.
It sounds better. Exactly. It's 23, and you've got a couple of international goals and plenty of league goals as well. So I'm really privileged to have you with us today. I want to take you back to where it all began at Millwall. And you came through the youth team with Tim Cahill. You made your debut in the same game. What was that like for you as a youngster breaking through at Millwall?
To be honest, it was kind of a position for the club at that point where they're in financial difficulties. Millwall going through quite a tough time. What was lucky about that spell, which going back to that era, was everyone, which is the same now for a lot of clubs, everyone was on the same, the same training facility. So we'd be training on a different pitch. If the first team needed a body or two, send a couple over. You went over, wanted to prove yourself, and you did well. And we was always mixing with the players, even if senior players wanted, some defensive headers or a little bit of ball striking after training. There's always one or two of us that were around. So they were kind of mentoring, they were helping, they were coaching. In effect, it was kind of sink or swim. Let's just see what these young players can do. And fortunately for us, because at times it's not the easiest club to play for in the nicest possible way, we went on to have some decent success over a decent period of time.
So you're a young 16, 17-year-old. You're going to make your debut for Millwall. How was the coach with you? Did he put his arm around you before the game? Did he fire you up? How was it? Or was it just, there's your shirt, go on there and do the business?
It was tough, but the dressing room was tough and ruthless. For all the kind of bit that I said there, it was still a ruthless dressing room. The YTS boys, and you just left school and you're into this environment that is a lot of boys from South London, tough environment, culture, the banter's flying. And in terms of the coaching, I remember we had standards set right from the beginning. Billy Bonds was the manager of the first team. We had to travel in every day with collar and shoes. Like I literally had probably one shirt, one pair of shoes. I was wearing the same gear every day. First pre-season, Billy Bonds takes us for a park run and wins it himself, the manager of the first team. So you just kind of, it's a little bit of learning on the job in a way. There's no manual kind of when you step out of school into that type of environment. My first team experience with Billy Bonds was a real positive one of trust. I felt valued. I could tell that he was having me. But despite, I had Mick Flanagan first, youth team manager, and then Kevin O'Callaghan. And it was kind of a tough love because we was good players. He was treated well, but also, you was brought down a peg or two if you stepped out of line or weren't doing what they wanted on a Saturday in the South East Counties League.
You're a coach today, in today's world, working with England U21s. How much have you taken with you from that experience, or have you just completely adapted and changed?
The bit that I've taken with me and kind of didn't use was probably the bit of how I was spoken to at times from coaches, like realising you can't speak to me like that. I didn't obviously say that, but I recognised at the time I don't like that way of communicating. I really don't like it, and it's affected me in a negative way. In a weird way, in a negative way, but a positive way, because then I'm a bit of like, F you. I am going to kick on. I am going to do it. And in other ways, again, negative and positive possibly, I've brought with me standards from the very beginning. Maybe even Billy Bonds setting those standards early about how you dress. Steve Gritt, dress smart, play smart. I still remember it to this day. He was our reserve team manager, and he took it. He used to do ratings every game. He used to give out awards at the end of the season. And I just remember that quote. and standards. But the bit that I've taken with me negatively and positively is probably that bit that actually you did a LinkedIn post about enjoying the moment. I can never enjoy the moment. It was just, if you enjoy the moment, you're going backwards. I look back at the season Crystal Palace staying in the Premier League after that season where we started the worst any team had ever started in the Premier League history, and we stay up. We're on the M6 half hour after the game. I'm on to the next one, next season, just not enjoying that moment. And that's conditioning from, I think, from that era that we're talking about.
You suffered with a lot of injuries throughout your career. If you see now an injured player, right, in your squad, is that in your mind, or is it just, right, let's just get the result and I'll see how he is on Monday?
I think because of my own experiences, and I've had managers that are only interested in the starting 11, wouldn't even go in the physio room. So I'd always make a point, especially the long-term injuries. We had a player at Forest in my last spell that had a long-term injury. So it was sitting with him, who's your favourite? Just keeping him involved, just still having individual meetings with that player.
Yeah.
Where it's just randomly in an afternoon, be at my desk watching a game, then I just shut it down and just go and walk into the physio room or help out in a session in the physio room, little volleys or whatever it might be, just keeping them involved.
What for you is the role of an assistant? How do you feel your role? And I know it's also been a first team coach as well. How do you feel what is your role within the group?
I think one way I describe it is kind of filling in the gaps. And sometimes it's hard for me to explain that. I think with Roy, the big one I think with Roy and Ray Lewington was that, we going at Crystal Palace. Roy at that time's late 60s, the same as Ray. I at the time am 36. I'm black kid from London. The majority of the squad's the same, and the academy. It was just the perfect fit all round. Although you've got to obviously have some skills and do the job, especially at that level. I think they needed someone younger, someone that was just in tune with just the modern player. I was only retired for 2 years when I went in at Crystal Palace. So they just needed that person. Some of it, I don't think you can get on any coaching course and manual. Probably the only time that I've had a first team coach's role where it was full clarity at the start was probably Steve Cooper. Like roles, and as well as having that great connection with him, like where we could be sort of vulnerable, and I shared some of my stuff with him at the beginning. Like it's clear from the start, attacking set pieces, focus on in possession. You're going to be delivering, part of the session it was just really clear at the start of what was expected of me, what he thought of me. But most of my other roles, you're kind of just learning on the job a little bit.
Have you ever found yourself in a role where you felt uncomfortable, where you didn't feel that the communication was necessarily clear?
Yeah, well, I struggle with, when I really struggle, and I'm always that guy that's left behind, by the way. Like at Reading, went in with Steve, and Brian McDermott came in, and Yap Stan came in. Nottingham Forest, went in with Chris, Steve Cooper came in, and Nuno came in. I struggle when I don't feel part of it and connected and having a value there. As soon as that self-worth kind of starts to drop for me, then I can't operate at my best. That's some of my own stuff, but it's also, I'm aware of probably that's me as well. I do need to feel involved and connected and part of it. And probably I do want the manager potentially to like me and, know what a good coach I am. I maybe do need a little bit of that as well. And the odd, I like that session. That's just part of me.
Yeah, I get that. And it's really interesting because, you're someone who's really, really self-aware and you feel that, you feel it deeply. We know each other, quite well at this point. it's fascinating that then you recognize that in the other players. I think you having that awareness in a coaching role is fantastic. And I believe I'm talking as a player here, or about to retire, coming to the end of my career, but as a player for the last 17 years going, I wish I had more of that. I wish I had more of you, where I had somebody when I wasn't feeling valued and I wasn't feeling great. I want to touch on the fact you actually stepped away from football. You stepped away to go and study to be a counsellor. Firstly, how difficult was that decision? And secondly, how was it?
The big challenge is when you're as a coach feeling like shit and you've got to still try and do that, because it's not always been me doing that all the time. I've had a lot of occasions when I felt like shit, missing home, not feeling great, having one of my moments, and I've not had that conversation. Instead, I've just ducked into the office because it's the easy decision. Maybe all of that, in a sense, came to a head when I just decided to step away completely. Like, I stepped away when I left Crystal Palace. I was just burnt out, really. Like, I was just done. I was flying back from a family holiday, and I just couldn't physically and mentally continue. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do next. So inevitably, after a few months, when the novelty wore off, I was lost and not sure what I wanted to do and no direction. So the next phone call, I'm back in, because that's more comfortable than being uncomfortable in the unknown, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Forest one, for a year, I started planning when the next counselling course is going to start, set up a business, all of that stuff, company account, do a bit of research into this world. So I was ready when we got promoted with Forest to step away from it and just pursue something that I've been interested in most of my life through my own experiences of counselling when I'm 16, 17 years old. Just one, as an interest, two, because I wanted something else as well, not just that footballer identity. I wanted something else after. And three, I can see the amount of people in the game that need that help. And then after 12 months, I had the phone call again from Steve to come back to Forest. Yeah. And I was at that wobble stage again of, where's this counselling going? I'm not sure what I'm doing. So I went back, and then it's sort of a similar pattern, really. Steve goes, change of manager, didn't feel I was doing enough, decide to leave again. And then it was, whenever I've had them breaks in the last few years, I've just taken the next step. I think it's just enhancing what I feel my strength as a coach is, which if I'm being totally honest, I don't think it is, master tactician or necessarily always analysing and watching a game and seeing it. That could be, I think, better. But I think I'm good with the players. The other aspect is good with all staff members throughout the club, treat people properly with respect, can, relate to the top players in the team, and your squad players exactly the same.
The managers you've worked under, the best managers you've worked under, right? Whether this be as a player or as a coach, how many of them got their team right, their staff team right? So how many of them had somebody on board like yourself that will help people feel involved, that are feeling, left out or feeling lonely or feeling down? How important is each role? And what for you, whether you don't have to name the coach, what was the best attributes that that coach had within his staff team?
I think the best ones just realise their own strengths and weaknesses. The best ones have got that self-awareness and know that if they're not an amazing people person, that someone, a member of their staff, is good with the players, can pick players up. Like, I could argue my best ever season with Blackburn, when we finished 6th in the Premier League under Mark Hughes, I probably didn't have the best relationship with Mark Hughes, but I felt he believed in me. He had a good staff around him with Eddie Ned and Mark Bowen at the time that, were the ones mainly to get around the players. But I was also a player that actually would chat with the coaches and managers as well and show an interest in that. I remember my last spell at West Brom. I'm not waiting for the doctor or physio to tell the manager I'm not. I'm going straight in Steve Clarke's office and telling him myself, because I could say, like most of my managers and coaches, I've got on pretty well with, but I don't know. I was always quite a curious player, and interested, and especially obviously on my coaching journey as well. And that's probably why, by the way, after 2 years of retiring, I'm working under Steve Clarke twice and Roy Hodgson. Really, I'm getting these jobs from what they've seen of me as a player. And the question I was asking and being curious and starting my coaching journey, very difficult to come out the game and just decide, right, I think I'm going to be a coach now. I'm not getting an opportunity. If you've not kind of built the foundations of showing an interest, of starting to get on the qualification journey, of maybe asking the manager or coach, what did you think of the game at the weekend, having a discussion around it.
Which coach had the most profound effect on you?
I still love Roy Hodgson. Simplicity, excellent basics. He wants proper practices. Get your back four in with two midfielders in front or one. Something obviously you can't teach as well in his enthusiasm and love of the game, but just real football as well. Because I feel a lot of this stuff now, everything's so short, so tight, so like many different kind of elements to it and rules, and we're coming away from proper, relatable football. He probably got a handful of sessions, Roy, but just like loves 3v2s, loves getting defenders defending, and actually doesn't call it 3v2. He calls it 3v3. You got the goalkeeper as well, by the way. He always used to say that 3v3, and he'd get after the keepers for letting the two down. Just get you properly working.
Yeah. It's a really good point that you've touched on. You've just taken me back there. I remember working with Roy with the England national team, and we did a 3v2 or 3v3 as he would call it. And I've allowed the striker, as he's on the angle about to shoot near post, I've allowed him to come back in and then just curl it into the far corner. And he's just stopped the session and gone, I've just seen you do this on the weekend for Tottenham against Aguero. And he was right. Aguero did it to me a good few times in my career, where he's gone to fake the shot at the near post, chops back and goes to the far post. And he said, if you show him towards the near post, right, and you narrow that angle and he scores there, I'm on the keeper. And I will be on the keeper, right? But if you allow him to come in and open up the whole goal, that's on you. And it's really interesting that you've just brought that back to me, because I use that as a coach all the time. Whenever I'm working with players now, I'm always showing them, narrow the angle, narrow the angle, narrow the angle. That's on the goalkeeper. So it's really interesting that at different periods of our career, we've both come across the same coach who's had an influence on us. And that's how important it is. And as you said, he has a handful of stuff, but he's very, very good at it.
Yeah, and I did that practice. I had a grassroots team that I'm helping out. I did that with them a couple of weeks ago, and it was brilliant. You can get so much. And the extra bit of detail that he used to give in that would be, even if they do shift it wide, that's not, sometimes players think that's dead. You can still get that leg across another half a yard or a yard to block that shot into the far post. Yeah. Don't give up on it. It's not dead.
Yeah.
And the keeper can do the rest after that.
So you're now working with England U21s. How have you found that experience? Obviously, international football, you're back into international football, but this time working with a younger age group. Do you find it's different working with the 21s compared to the first team? Do you treat them differently? Are the sessions differently? Give us a bit of an insight.
Yeah, well, I've kind of gone in and got involved. I know I played with Lee Carsley, Republic, and we had some initial talks, and it happened quite quickly. But it's almost like just there to support, really. I'm not leading much. I'm just there, happy to do support. I think could lead into a bit of mentoring kind of work within the group. Obviously, once you've built that trust with the squad. But in terms of the quality, and I'm always interested by interesting opportunities, and this one, you're working with the top elite of the country. You're working with a squad that's probably worth 300 to 400 million. I wasn't surprised, is not the word, but the connection sort of already, like we've got this perception now that all young players are just sat on their phones and this and that and computer and that. There was majority of the squad really together, sitting for hours after dinner, talking amongst each other, seemed to be enjoying each other's company. And I actually just quite like doing bits and pieces as well at times, bits that need doing. Might be a couple of extras at the end, just supporting sessions, chats with players when the sessions ended. Again, it's kind of just an awareness of, the players. Do your homework. Always do your homework with the players. Might be you've seen a game at the weekend. It might be a player that's moved to a different club. How are you getting on there? That straight away kind of builds a little connection. If you're going into a group and you already know bits and pieces and you've done your homework, that goes a long way.
We're in 2025. I've just completed my license. So much of it was done on the computer, but you do your sessions still with pen and paper. Can you explain why?
I know. Just that still a bit of that old-fashioned one in me. I don't know whether, if it was good enough for Roy Hodgson being in the game for 50 years. To be honest, it's not pencil. I have got the fancy pens with all the different colours.
This one?
It's just fun. No, like the fine lines. What have we got here? I've not got all the colours here, but it's like these ones with the greens and blues and all of that. I just really like writing stuff down. Even I've got a little diary that I have that I write in, and my first coaches that I learned under Steve Clarke and Roy Hodgson had the 4-pitch paper and pens, and that's what I like. The only problem is it's got boxes and boxes everywhere.
I want to ask you, what drill would you put on for, let's say, 3 or 4 strikers that you have available after a session wanting to do a little bit of practice?
Okay, so something like typical of, firstly, you'd probably look at opposition for the weekend. I think especially now, you'd be sort of thinking about what does that look like? Is it 2 centre-backs that are not particularly mobile on the turn? So I might put, for argument's sake, if you put kind of 2 centre-backs, or they would actually be like mannequins. If you narrow them up, yeah, exactly there. So mirror that, and you've almost got your 2 9s on the outside of the 4 and 5, as if they were kind of stood off a mannequin. And then if you put like a 10, so if you got the 9 and the 10 actually there, but then you might have what might be an 8 then. You might all of a sudden have 2 or 3 midfield players that come over and want to do a bit of finishing. So if you put that player sort of if you sort of straddle that player in between, if you get it closer to the D, yeah, but further back towards the centre circle, so it's straddling the dark and the light, yeah. Higher up, that's the one. Okay. With this, the dynamics of it might change a little bit, but if you then put as if it was 2 midfield players parallel with that 8, but quite tight.
Here?
But as if they were mannequins. If you put them in the red and the black.
Okay, no problem. Here?
But you want, if you get that 8 a little bit higher though, so he's just sort of drifting off the back of that 8.
Here?
Like that. But if you put another red and black the other side of the 8.
Yeah. This side or here?
Yeah, that's the one. Perfect. And you might start as a coach with the ball. The sizes would be sort of closer to the goal, but it just gives a better picture. If you had a coach like the D, perfect.
Here or this side? This side here.
Yeah, that side. So the 8, So it'd be like and again, you might have a couple of wide players that drift over. But so the coach would start with the ball. The 8 would find his space either side of the 6 or the 8. Sort of drift, like just say he's like flat, and then he would receive the ball. So his movement to get that space in between the lines. He might then he can either play the 10 or the 8. And nice and simple, the first kind of progression would be that player that he passes to steps off the mannequin, has a touch and a finish.
Okay. Are we adding a goalkeeper in here?
Goalkeeper would be in there. But do you know what? I think I actually heard from a couple of the coaches that were working with the senior internationals and worked with Harry Kane that would just get a couple of bags of balls after training with a couple of mini goals in the corner of the goal and repetition of just hitting the corners. But yeah, for this practice, so it'd be stepping away from the mannequin or away from the defender, and it would be a touch and a finish.
Would he be stepping inside like this or stepping outside like that?
That's a good point, because I would be where I was at the start, almost of the journey would be, right, very structured. You are taking it outside. But now, depending on the player as well, you might have, as we now see, opposite foot on opposite side of the pitch. So player's decision. So he can step away for a touch and a finish, or he can bring it back across for a touch and a finish.
Would you be encouraging him here to put it in the far corner like this or reverse it inside?
I think if he's bringing it back inside, it's almost like the instinct of the player in that central position, because some are good at reversing it, as we might say, throwing in the eyes and reversing it in the bottom corner. But definitely if it's going wider, you are looking for the far corner. Obviously, you've got that potential of a rebound back out, just gives you a better opportunity of scoring. What I would then do...
Yeah,
go on, Colt.
Would the 10 be active? So you mentioned their rebound. The 9 is inside here. He takes the shot. If the keeper saves it here, would the 10 be active for the rebound, or is the 10 dead waiting for the next ball to hit?
He's dead for me in this practice, but that is definitely something that you can factor in and add on, definitely with your progressions as you go along. After that finish, the 8 would then receive a second ball from the coach.
Okay. In the same position?
Ideally, he's moving to another position, like replicating as he would be, just being active for, movement and trying to find that space in between. He then finds the 9 that's just taken the shot. Nice and simple, just sets it back to the 8 for a finish.
Okay.
As if it's a midfield player, having a finish. I think at the start, it was just generic kind of touch and a finish, or just, I play it back to you, just simple stuff. But now it's almost individual development, it's opposition, and it's kind of game plan related.
I really, really appreciate all of your insight today. I can't thank you enough for sharing your personal experiences as a player and as a coach. So, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure.